Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam. Listen, reflect and absorb. Dear listeners, Sai Ram and welcome to a radio series in which a divine discourse by Bhagavan is played in small parts, and following each part a short discussion is undertaken to reflect on the message. This is a part of Radio Sai's Thursday Live, hosted by Sai Prakash and Prem every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. only on Asia's stream of Radio Sai Global Harmony. Today's episode was first broadcast live on 27th March 2014. The discourses undertaken for study in this program are from the series of discourses delivered as part of the summer course in Indian Culture and Spirituality 1990. The clips played today are from the discourse delivered on 31st May 1990.
Offering humble pranams at Bhagwan's lotus feet. Dear listeners, we welcome you to this week's episode of Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam. As always, we are here to go through Swami's discourses, the discourses he gave as part of the 1990 Summer Course series. We completed the 12th discourse last week. I had the company of Brother Hari Shankar from the Sathya Sai Central Trust, and today Sai Prakash is back with me. We're going to host this program, and we are going to the 13th discourse in that series. The discourse we completed was on self-knowledge. The past two discourses, I think, Sai Prakash, one was on self-knowledge and the other was knowing thyself.
Right.
And now Swami is saying the topic for this discourse is what is freedom? The question itself is quite an intriguing one.
That's right. And for the fortunate two of us who have already gone through the discourse, we can only promise the listeners that there's something very, very exciting coming up.
We should promise and make a confession that the discourse is exciting. We're not too sure about the discussion which will follow that.
That's true.
Because it's an external look at it itself says that this is going to be really a profound one. But it's a very important topic in that sense, what is freedom, because much is being spoken about in civil society about freedom of speech. That's such a high talking point.
That's true, but looking at the flow in which Swami has been coming in this series of discourses, I was just thinking, why did Swami place this chapter here? What is freedom? I mean, all the while Swami has been teaching us what you are not. You are not the body, you are not the senses, you are not the mind, you are not the intellect, you are not ahamkara. He comes to a point where he says even sadhana is useless. You don't have to do sadhana to acquire something. You have to only remove the illusion that is around you, and then you know your true identity. Now, he puts it here because do we have a choice? I mean, freedom automatically means that you have a choice of doing something or not doing something. You have the choice. Now, the whole question about freedom and free will is the choice in your hand. So, at this point where you have to actually remove the illusion, are you free to do it, or are you bound by destiny when you will actually get that experience? So, I was just thinking about it, and it comes to the same thing, that God's will is always there, His grace is always there. That's why Swami always says, you be the container, you be ready to receive. So, basically, when you are ready to understand the intricacies and to contemplate on the reality of existence, I think that is when God's grace, which is always there, will shine forth through you.
And one other thing, you look at the series as such, is that one thing which is following through from the first discourse is Swami is correcting the perspective.
Yeah.
In the very first discourse, Swami spoke about how the truth, when young men and women, when the youth adhere to truth and righteousness, that's the best seva you can do to your country.
Very true.
When people are so obsessed, I wouldn't say obsessed, they're so keen to do good to the society. So I'm saying that, the intention is good, but the path you're taking is not the absolute one, not the right one.
Correct.
So similarly, the other discourses, when Swami spoke about the senses, when Swami spoke about the mind, it was all correcting the vision. Swami saying that you misunderstood these things. You have to put them in the right perspective. And same thing about the gunas.
Yes.
What Swami spoke about the gunas was completely revealing one to all of us. Where Swami spoke of what is the nature. And again, when Swami spoke about self-effort, when Swami spoke about choices, making choices, that is where even this is coming. We are talking so much about freedom. I should have the freedom to. The children are talking about wanting to have the freedom. There was a time when the children get the freedom after they are 18. Correct. Now the children want freedom at 14, 15.
Okay.
So I think it's a very important discourse in that sense when Swami is talking about what is freedom.
Correct.
And what freedom should you look for. And are you really looking for that freedom? Correct. Is that freedom really there, or is it like a mirage which you're chasing?
Yes, that's true. And one point before we move on to the previous discourse, of course I was not there for the last segment, but this point of redefining what is bhakti is very beautiful. He has what is bhakti. Bhakti is constant contemplation on the self. So when you are constantly contemplating on the self, that is bhakti. That is exactly what jnana marga is also. So he says bhakti and jnana are the same. And the string that ties them together, the singular bond, is prema. That is love. It's so beautiful because, in another place, I think we have mentioned this before as well. Bhagavad Gita gives you karma marga, bhakti marga, jnana marga, and in fact, it gives solutions to people of any walk of life. Anyone refers to Bhagavad Gita, he finds an answer in whatever level of understanding he is. But in Prema Vahini, in the book, he gives a very beautiful example. He says, Karma, Bhakti, Jnana all are one. There's no difference. He says, if you take a Mysore Pak and you say the taste of the Mysore Pak is Bhakti Marga and the height of the Mysore Pak is Jnana Marga and the shape of the Mysore Pak is Karma Marga. So he says, when you put the Mysore Pak on your tongue, the shape changes, the height changes and the sweetness is felt. So he says, all the three are one and the same. You have to integrate all three. So this beautiful point about bhakti and jnana is also very relevant because people think that I am Advaitin and I follow only one path towards my goal. But hasn't Shankaracharya written so many songs and stutis praising the Lord? It's all one and the same. That's what I would...
Right. Even the way Swami words some of his commands. I happened to go through where in Conversations with Baba by John Hislop.
Yes.
At one place he asked Swami that, Swami, you say wife here when I'm here. He said, what is the real essence of that statement? He asked Swami. And Swami says, wife here when I am here. Swami says that I is that real self.
Oh.
Swami said when you reach that state where you have full confidence in that higher self, you will know that when this self is guiding every action of mine, what am I supposed to fear?
Correct.
No, why should I fear? So Swami said you have to remind yourself that you are just a container of that higher I.
Correct.
And you should tell yourself there is nothing to fear because that I is the one which is doing everything.
Correct.
And that is the beauty of Swami. There is Advaita in Bhakti, there is Bhakti in Advaita. There is no way Swami will separate it and give it to you as two separate ones. As Swami would say, Bhakti is not complete without that self-knowledge. Self-knowledge is tasteless without that Bhakti.
And here also again Swami says very beautifully the inner significance of Shraddha and Pinda, offering of Pinda to your forefathers. And he says it's not the ball of rice that you're offering. This is an offering to the self and you have to offer your own body. He says you have to offer your body and all the faculties and skills and only then you are eligible for higher understanding. That's what I would say. And then I think he ends the previous discourse with this beautiful explanation about Tungabhadra.
Right.
And he says how your body is called Tungabhadra. And he also says you should live up to your name. Tungabhadra is something which is very sacred. It's a great thing which is sacred. And he gives the example of Tyagaraja, how he lived up to his name as a king of renunciation. And how even when the king sent him a lot of riches, he politely refused it. He says he prayed to the Lord, Nidhi Chala Sukama. Ishwarasa Nidhi Chala Sukama. So that was a beautiful way in which Swami concluded the previous discourse. But there is one line here which says, students, this is a golden opportunity. And so many elderly people and eminent people are sharing with you their experience and valuable information. But you should utilize this information for your transformation, which is possible only when you put into actual practice at least a few things out of the many things you have been hearing. With so much of love, Swami must have made this statement. It's like Ganges flowing and we have a small container standing. How much can we actually take in it? If you really feel absolutely, small in front of this ocean of knowledge. And Swami he's just telling, start with following one of them. But the beauty in this, as we mentioned earlier, I think in the series sometime, Swami told one of the students, you have to follow any one of my sayings, any one of my teachings you take and follow, automatically everything else will join. So
right, like when Swami spoke in that discourse about the intellect, Swami said Shraddha is the most important. That earnestness, that desire to reach something, a desire to please Swami. In all our cases, it was that. That is what is important. You might be doing the absolutely wrong thing. That wonderful story which goes, I think we narrated it before, where that juggler goes in front of the deity and starts juggling. He's standing there in the temple in front of the deity and he's going on juggling, and the story goes, the deity appears in front of him and he says, what are you trying to do? He said, what stunts are you trying to do in front of me? And the Lord says that, don't you know that I am not moved by stunt devotion? Very profound words. He said, I'm not moved by stunt devotion. Don't you know why you're performing the stunt in front of me? And then the stuntman says, oh Lord, this is all I have. The stunt is all that I have. So I'm offering you the stunt devotion and seeking the real devotion from you.
Beautiful.
That is all it is, when you sit in a classroom and suppose the teacher is teaching some high-flowing concept. If you have lost first few parts of the concept, the whole class is a washout for you.
Correct.
But here in the 12th discourse, towards the end of the 12th discourse, Swami is saying, if you've been overwhelmed by whatever you've heard, forget it. Just pick up any one thing. Correct. And just show me that earnest desire to follow that one thing to please me. That is enough. I'll make sure that everything else comes your way.
But what you said is really true. When physically Swami was around, we tried to do whatever we could and we tried to offer the best we had to Swami. And oftentimes we would get rebuked with the same word, stunt. This is all a stunt. This is stunt devotion. This is all part-time devotion and all that. But I think he just gives you time to contemplate and understand what true devotion is. Right.
In fact, another discourse which we played this morning, even in that Swami says the importance is prioritizing. That when you slowly start giving more and more importance to God, Swami was talking about how to overcome attachment. He said the best way is to get attached to something which is more dear, more sublime.
Okay.
He says when you start doing that prioritization, when there are two things you prioritize, then there are three things you prioritize. Eventually you will come to the state where your top priority is God. Top priority is to please Swami. Top priority is to find that unity with divinity. So that itself will let you overcome all the other attachments, all the other small things which pull you down.
And one thing, was very strange, in retrospect when I think of it. For example, since I was involved in doing some artwork which would be offered to Swami, constantly you're thinking only about Swami. Like, will Swami like this? Will Swami like this? I should do this properly so that Swami will like it. And I think more than the end result, more than the final painting or drawing that comes out, the whole process is what Swami looks at. Because I had a very beautiful experience. This was for the sports meet in 1999 and we were in Brindavan. And for some reason, the last minute we had decided that we will make a huge painting. And the painting was actually Gita Upadesham painting and only two of us were doing it because it was an oil painting and the size was something like 18 feet by 18 feet.
Okay.
It was massive and we didn't have a place in Brindavan where we could assemble the whole thing. So we were doing it in parts and then assembling parts and seeing whether it's
proportion is fine. Okay. My God.
It was an unbelievable thing and only Swami has achieved it through us. But the whole time, it was so tense and it was so intense also. And we were really giving more than what we had, giving our best and then doing the work. And the sports day, it was displayed. Actually, when we came to Patti, my father came and saw the painting. And he said, yeah, Gitopadesham anybody can do. But what is unique about this? When Swami is sitting here, you are identifying Swami with the person who has actually given the Gita.
Right.
So in a very faint tone, we had painted an outline of Swami. In a very faint tone in the clouds, merging with the cloud. And Swami immediately saw that from the stage. And he said, see, Swami is also standing there. So he is always looking at all the details. But the best part of the whole thing was, after the sports meet was done, the painting was brought to the mandir and it was reassembled near where we have the Om gate now.
Right,
and we have the Ram, Lakshman, Sita statues.
Right, where the mobile hospital is parked. Right?
Exactly. So there the painting was assembled because it was quite a huge one. And Swami was standing on the veranda. And that time there was this Ganesh statue was not there in the center.
Okay.
So from the veranda, Swami had a direct view to that painting. And Swami said, who are the boys who did this painting? And myself and the other boy were sitting quite close, and warden sir told Swami, these two boys. Swami says, you need not tell me, I know. He says, all through the time they were doing the painting, they only thought was, will Swami be happy, will Swami be happy? And they had no other thought. And that alone is enough for me. And that has made me happy. Very beautiful. See, he is not looking at the end result. He is not looking at how the painting has come out. He is not looking at what you are going to achieve. That earnestness and that sincerity is actually during the process. In the process, because the process itself leads you to. So, I just felt that.
Right. I remember a similar interaction which happened with a student. For some reason, he was very upset with Swami. I think he wanted Swami to respond in a certain way, and Swami was not responding. And he had done, as typically we students would do, he had done a lot of other things, hoping that this would please Swami too, and Swami would come and do. But it was not happening, and he was very angry with Swami. He was in tears. And that day, Swami came and asked him, he said, why are you angry with me? Okay, he said, Swami, you know why I'm angry. I mean, this anger is because I love you. This anger is because I really love you and I want something from you. I want to come near you and I'm not getting that. Then immediately Swami said something which was very profound. He said, this is not ordinary anger. Swami said, this is spiritual anger. And then Swami said, what is important when you get this anger is, you should make sure that this anger does not allow you to stop and go away. This anger should make you strive harder. Swami said, then this is good anger. That is what Swami did. Sometimes he responded, like in your case, where he acknowledged that, yes, this was done for me.
Correct.
And in those places when that acknowledgement was not forthcoming,
yes,
it only meant that I need to step up.
Step
harder.
Up. You are getting a promotion.
Right. This is not enough for this class anymore.
And one beautiful thing which one of the wardens was mentioning, like when Swami was upset with the students and keeping a distance and not talking to them, he said, Swami, please, Swami, students are really praying hard, Swami. They want you to speak to them, Swami, you should speak. And then Swami said, oh, who is Karuna Sagara? You are Karuna Sagara or I am Karuna Sagara? You seem to be knowing your students better than what I know. I know how much they are pining for me and I know when to give them the reward. So, really speaking, we had no freedom.
Right. I mean, that was something which Swami would often show us, that he just allowed himself to be pleased. I don't think we could have ever pleased him with all our small activities. And a little child could do a small design on that letter and just write, I love you, and Swami would be so happy with it.
Very true.
And you can't even say that it was a feeling which pleased him. Because I don't know if some of our things were really done with that much feeling to please Swami. It's just that Swami chose to be pleased. Swami chose to give us that incentive so that we can intensify the way we would, whatever we would take up.
Very true. In fact, that's what we say. When Krishna was ready to grant Shishupala and Kamsa and others themselves moksha, how much more eager he would be to come to his devotee. He says that when a devotee, even little bit you pray and pine for me, I am ever ready. He is ever ready. And the only thing is he keeps raising the bar. And if you are really going beyond, and he is the one who is happiest.
There's one a person who is doing Bhagavata Parayanam. He says when Prahalada was thrown off the cliff, the Bhagavatam says that Vishnu appears there and holds Prahalada in his arms. So this Kathakadu, he says Vishnu does not hold Prahalada like this, where your arms are near your chest. It seems Vishnu holds Prahalada by bending in near his ankle.
Oh.
And he says, why does he do that? To see if Prahalada's faith changes from that distance to this distance.
Oh my God.
That is how difficult taskmaster the God is, and that's for good reason.
That's right.
As you said, it is for raising the bar, and it is for taking us from one class to the other. You have to graduate, as Swami would say.
Right.
And there is a wonderful incident of, Abdul Razak Korbu, that book which is written, Satyasaka Baba Bhagwan. In that he says, he goes to a doctor who prescribes eye surgery for him, I think a cataract or something. And he thinks that if I come to Swami, maybe by miraculously he'll cure my, ailment. His idea is I can save 8,000 rupees.
Okay.
It was long time. I think that was the amount of money he had to spend for that surgery. And it was a difficult amount for him to manage because he was working as a lecturer and all that. So he comes to Parthi and Swami calls him for an interview. It's a wonderful interview. He's given the transcript of that interview in that book. One of the things which happens is he says, Swami, I need an eye surgery. And straight comes the response from Swami. Swami says, no miracles for devotees.
Oh.
He says, you're an old devotee, you don't need miracles for faith. Swami says, go and get it operated. And then continues with the discussion. And the beautiful thing is, of course, he goes back and he goes to one of the best doctors in the city, gets his eye operated. And for no reason, when he goes to the doctor to pay the bill, the doctor says, no, it's okay, fine. I know you for so many years. So he said, see, I was clamoring for a miracle. Swami didn't do the miracle, but he knew why I wanted the miracle, so that he handled.
Beautiful. So I think we'll go to the first clip of the next discourse,
Right.
which says, what is freedom?
Tamarakupai talatalalade Tamarakupai talatalalade Neeti bottuvaler nilakadallenidi బ్రతుకభిమానపు పొరల కొంపరా బ్రతుకభిమానపు పొరల కొంపరా దిగులు దుఃఖముల తెరరా లోకము దిగులు దుఃఖముల తెరరా లోకము హరి గోవింద హరి గోవింద హరి గోవింద అనరా మంద.
Like a drop of water on the lotus leaf, which shines forth, which sparkles, but which is not steady all the same. Life is like that, which is very unsteady and which is full of attachments. And life is also full of fear, sorrow, and there is a screen which is covering the reality in the world. Hari Govinda, Hari Govinda.
విద్యార్థులారా, విద్యార్థినీయులారా,
Dear students, boys and girls,
ఆధ్యాత్మికం అంటే ఏమిటో, వ్యక్తిగతమైన స్వాతంత్రం అంటే ఏమిటో, ఈ రెండింటి యొక్క యథార్థ స్వరూపాన్ని గుర్తించటం సామాన్య మానవులకు సాధ్యం కాదు.
it is not possible for ordinary individuals to understand the real nature of the spirituality and the individual freedom.
ఈ ఆధ్యాత్మికమనగా కేవలము ఒంటరితనమని కాని ఏకాకి జీవితమని కాని భావించరాదు.
When you say it is spirituality, it doesn't mean that it is something of a solitary life or a lonely life.
యావత్ మానవ జీవితం మధ్య ప్రేమ బీజములు నాటి
In the midst of humanity, sowing the seeds
శాంతి
of
ప్రసూనములు వికరింపచేసి
awakening patience, perseverance and such great virtues,
పవిత్ర ప్రేమను ప్రజలకు అందించటమే ఈ యొక్క ఆధ్యాత్మికం యొక్క అంతరార్థం.
offering sacred love and distributing among the men, that is the true meaning of spirituality.
ఇందులో ప్రత్యేకమైనటువంటి యొక్క దివ్యత్వాన్ని మనం విచారించినప్పుడు ఇక్కడ ఆధ్యాత్మికమని కాని వ్యక్తిగతమైనటువంటి స్వాతంత్రమని కాని రెండు లేవు.
If you were to just examine this in a divine way and fashion, there is nothing like separate spirituality and individual freedom.
ఇంతవరకు జరిగినటువంటి యొక్క డిబేట్ కేవలం టిబెట్ మాదిరి ఉంటుండాలి. అనగా హృదయం అంటే ఏమిటో వాళ్ళు గుర్తించి వర్తించలేదు.
The debate that was carried on was not very fruitful and throwing light.
స్వాతంత్రం అనేటువంటిది వేదిక పైన ఒక్కొక్క వ్యక్తి తమ యొక్క భావములను ప్రకటించడమే స్వాతంత్రమని భావించారు.
They expressed the feeling that giving expressions to one's own feelings is freedom.
స్వాతంత్రం అన్నది ఈ జగత్తునందు ఎవ్వరికీ లేదు.
No one in this world has freedom.
కానీ రాజకీయంగా స్వాతంత్రమని ఒక పేరు వచ్చింది.
But politically, it is possible to obtain freedom.
ఈ స్వాతంత్రం అనగా ఏమిటి?
What is-
విదేశీయుల పరిపాలన నుండి వారిని పంపి స్వదేశీయుల పరిపాలనను స్వీకరించడము స్వాతంత్రమని భావించారు.
It is considered that getting release from the foreign rule and having our own independent rule is obtaining freedom.
ఇది వ్యక్తిగతమైన ఫ్రీడము కాదు, ఫండమెంటల్ స్వాతంత్రము కాదు.
It is neither individual freedom nor fundamental freedom.
కేవలము అహంకార తత్వాన్ని ప్రకటించే నిమిత్తమై కొన్ని ఆచరించినటువంటి చర్యలు మాత్రమే.
All these actions are only an expression of a sense of ego.
విదేశీయులు పోయిన తర్వాత స్వదేశీయులు స్వాతంత్రాన్ని పొందినామనుకున్నాం. ఎందులో స్వాతంత్రాన్ని పొందాం?
After the foreigners have left this country, we said that we have got the freedom. What type
కేవలం స్వాతంత్రం స్వాతంత్రం అన్నంత మాత్రం ప్రయోజనం లేదు.
by merely mentioning freedom,
ఐక్యతను సాధించినప్పుడే స్వాతంత్రము ప్రయోజనం అవుతుంది.
only when we get unity, then we can say that we have freedom.
ఐక్యతను సాధించక స్వాతంత్రం స్వాతంత్రం అనుకుంటే ఇది కేవలము పదము యొక్క స్వాతంత్రమే కాని జీవి యొక్క స్వాతంత్రం కాదు.
Without getting unity, if we say we have got freedom, it is freedom only in words, not freedom.
స్వాతంత్రం
in
అనేది
experience.
హృదయ స్థాయి నుండి ఏర్పడాలి.
Freedom should emerge and emanate from the heart.
హృదయం అంటే ఏమిటి?
What do you mean by heart?
కేవలం రక్త మాంసములతో కూడినటువంటి యొక్క ఈ గుండెకాయ కాదు.
It is not this physical heart which consists of blood circulation and muscles.
హృదయం అనగా ఒక స్థానమునకు కాని ఒక కాలమునకు కాని ఒక వ్యక్తికి కాని ఒక దేశమునకు కాని సంబంధించినటువంటిది కాదు.
When you say heart, it is not with reference to a particular state, a particular time, a particular individual or a particular country.
సర్వత్రా సర్వకాలములు యందు కూడాను సర్వ దేశములు యందు కూడాను సర్వ వ్యక్తులు యందు కూడాను సమత్వంగా ఉండేటువంటి యొక్క దివ్య తత్వమే హృదయం.
Heart is such a divinity and divine principle which is all pervasive and obtained in every place and at all times, in every country, and
ఈ హృదయమునకు రూపము లేదు.
there is no form for this heart.
కానీ మానవుని యొక్క దేహమునందు దేనిని మనం హృదయముగా భావిస్తున్నామో అది మధ్యలో వచ్చి మధ్యలో పోయేటువంటిది.
What you consider the physical heart of man as heart, it comes in the middle and disappears also.
దేనిని గుర్తిస్తే సర్వమును గుర్తించినటువంటి వాడవుతాడో అలాంటి యొక్క దివ్యతత్వాన్ని గుర్తించడమే ఇదే నిజమైనటువంటి స్వాతంత్రం.
By recognizing which particular principle, one would have recognized and realized every other principle. If one realizes such divinity, then only one.
Wonderfully, Swami puts a lot of things and connects them all together. He talks about political freedom. He spoke about the freedom of speech.
Mm-hmm.
Then he spoke about the relation between unity and freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a few truths which we wouldn't like to address in that, otherwise, but Swami was very particular, saying, because in a sense we tend to glorify that freedom struggle,
Correct.
the independence which you've achieved, which is nonetheless important event for the country, but to have given too much importance to that and not to have realized. And
Correct.
because that is one thing, if you look at the freedom struggle as such, almost all freedom fighters,
Okay.
and I don't think many countries can boast of this, were men of real spiritual wisdom.
Correct.
Because when Swami quotes them, be it the trio Lal Bal Pal, be it Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, Mahatma Gandhi, of course, they all had a very, very strong moorings in spirituality.
In a sense, Aurobindo as well.
Aurobindo.
Yes.
And they were very clear that this is important for the spiritual progress of this countrymen. They had that idea very clear. In fact, if you read the writings of Bal Gangadhar Tilak, that's what he says. And when somebody asks him, what will you do when you get freedom? He said, I'll go back and become a teacher. Because he said, this is, I'm very clear of what the people want. Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose is somebody who ran away to the Himalayas when he was a teenager.
Okay.
And he comes back and joins the freedom struggle. So all of them had that spiritual aspirant in them. And they also took up the freedom struggle in that as a sadhana as part of their spiritual progress.
Very true. Very true. I mean, possibly they knew what real freedom was.
Right.
And keeping that in view, they felt that this is the first step or whatever it is. Because when Swami speaks about Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose also, Swami is really very moved.
Right.
And he gives him so much of importance and sets him as a very high ideal for students to emulate. But the beautiful part is he says, true freedom springs from the level of the heart.
Right.
All this freedom is okay. But in a sense, it's right because yes, you have got freedom from a foreign rule, but we don't have freedom from our own rule right now. We are under our politicians.
Right.
Look at it now. And in that sense, there is no absolute freedom for anybody in any sphere of life. So he says true freedom springs only from the level of the heart. Then he goes on to define what is meant by the heart, Hridayam.
Right.
So,
but it's a very intriguing thing, why something would be named a heart, why an organ is named a heart, and when most religions and most scriptures refer to something as heart, which is completely different.
Correct.
I think it's only to give it that importance, because we know how important a organ the heart is.
Correct. It's essential for life to exist.
Right.
So also, I think this awareness or this collective heart that Swami is talking of, the heart that is present in everybody, the Hridayam.
Right.
Actually, heart is not the right translation for it.
Right.
Hridayam, as Swami says. Hridayam is one that is present in everybody. And that's amazing because he says that's directly the divine principle that's present in all.
And the wonderful way with which Swami begins the discourse, where he says, spirituality is not living in solitude.
Correct.
It is in bringing the awareness, the spiritual awareness, to as many people as possible and to strive for that.
Correct.
That is a true sign of spirituality.
In fact, when you think of that, automatically what comes to your mind is unity. Unity is such a beautiful concept. He says the ultimate unity of seeing God in all is the highest state of existence. But oftentimes Swami has told India, the only problem we have in our country is lack of unity.
Right.
And how related everything is, because unity in the sense of social life and society as such, but unity in the ultimate sense as well. So he says lack of unity, and here very beautifully he describes and defines what spirituality is. And yes, I think there is a level at which people go and they are able to control their mind in solitude, but I think the fulfillment of that is when they come back to the society and serve. Possibly that's what it is.
Right. And in fact, the idea of India itself, whenever Swami speaks so highly of Bharat, one of the beautiful things is that here we are, the way we look, the way we eat, the way we dress is so different. And you might go to the cornermost part of the country, let's say Assam or Meghalaya. Those people look so different from us.
Correct.
Their eating habits are completely different. Their culture is completely unique.
Correct.
But still there is a sense of brotherhood. There's a sense of, belonging. He said,
Correct.
Yes, you're Indian, I'm Indian.
Correct.
I think that is a message which this geographical unified nation that India is, it stands for.
No, I think that might be there in other countries as well. There is definitely a sense of brotherhood and, comradeship in most countries. But how deep is it rooted in spirituality?
Right.
Is something which is, I think, unique to in Bharat, as Swami would say. So the whole question is now, he is redefining what is Hridayam. And he says, true freedom can spring only from the level of the heart. So we have to understand what exactly freedom is. He has still not led the...
Right, but in fact, even before defining freedom, Swami is using two words. He's saying individual freedom and fundamental freedom.
Okay.
Saying that, forget spiritual freedom. I think fundamental freedom maybe, that is what Swami is referring to, the spiritual aspect of freedom. Forget that fundamental freedom, even the individual freedom is not there. So this idea that, I'm living in a free country, so I'm living in a democracy, I have the freedom. That also is a qualified freedom.
Correct.
It is not that complete, absolute freedom. I think
Correct.
that is something which Swami will go on to explain.
Possibly. And another concept which Swami has brought out in previous discourses is a concept of Satyam and Ritam.
Right.
See, here I think it's in a way relevant because Satyam, truth is, yes, you are free from foreign rule. In the ultimate sense of Ritam, that is what Swami is telling here. The Hridayam and what is actually freedom. And I think in the course of this discourse we will learn that absolute freedom and true freedom, which means freedom, the word giving meaning to the word freedom, can be achieved only in the ultimate sense of seeing unity in the entire cosmos.
Right.
I think that's what it is.
Hopefully, it sounds simple, but of course, I'm sure Swami will, because I think this is one of the longest discourses also.
Okay.
So
but, just going through the text itself, Swami is giving so many examples,
Right.
so many situations and so many beautiful things coming up in this discourse. And let us quickly go to the next clip.
Because, at the outset you think that where does the concept of freedom come in between all this?
Exactly.
So Swami is talking about knowledge, where, as you said, Satyam, Vritam, where does freedom feature in all this? So I think it's going to be an exciting discourse. So we'll go to the next clip.
Sure.
యదా అండాండే తథా బ్రహ్మాండే అన్నారు. అనగా అండాండమనగా వ్యక్తిగతమైనటువంటిది.
When you say andanda, it refers to the individual.
బ్రహ్మాండమనగా సమష్టి స్వరూపము.
Brahmanda refers to the cosmos.
తనను తాను గుర్తించుకున్నటువంటి వ్యక్తి సర్వమును గుర్తించగలడు.
The one who has realized himself has realized everything else.
అయితే తానంటే ఎవరు?
When you say he, who is the...
ఈనాటి మానవుడు ప్రపంచములో సర్వమును తెలుసుకొనుటకు ప్రయత్నిస్తున్నాడు.
Today's man is trying to know everything.
సర్వమును తెలియనని విర్రవీగుతున్నాడు.
He also feels proud that he knows everything.
ఒకవేళ తెలియకపోతే తెలుసుకొనుటకు కూడాను ప్రయత్నిస్తున్నాడు.
If he does not know, he is also making efforts to know.
కానీ మానవుడు తానెవరో, తన తత్వమేమిటో, తనను తాను తెలుసుకొనకుండా సర్వమును తెలుసుకొనుటకై ప్రయత్నిస్తున్నాడు.
But man is not trying to know who he really is, what his principle is. Without this, he is trying to know everything else.
ఉపనిషత్తునందు ఉద్దాలకుడు అనేటువంటి మహా పండితుడు తన కుమారుడైనటువంటి శ్వేతకేతుని విద్యాభ్యాస నిమిత్తమై పంపినాడు ఇంకొక గురువు దగ్గరికి.
In Upanishads, there is an instance wherein Uddalaka sent his son Swetaketu to another master for studies.
12 సంవత్సరములు చక్కగా సర్వ విద్యలు కూడాను గ్రహించాడు.
He spent 12 years learning all types of education.
కానీ అన్నియూ తెలుసునని వెర్రవీగి వెర్రివాడై తన తండ్రి దగ్గరకు వచ్చి, నాన్న నేను సర్వ విద్యలను నేర్చినానన్నాడు.
Feeling with a sense of conceit and pride, he came to his father and told him that he has learned everything.
అప్పుడు నాన్న ప్రశ్నించాడు, నాన్న ఏమి తెలిసినా సర్వమును తెలిసినట్టు అవుతుందో దానిని నీవేమైనా చదువుకున్నావా అన్నాడు.
Father questioned him, well child, have you learned that thing by learning which you would have learned everything else?
ఈ యొక్క కుమారుడు శ్వేతకేతుడు కొంత అహంకారం నుంచి క్రింద దిగాడు.
He got down from his conceit and ego a little.
అన్నింటికంటే కూడాను విద్యాహంకారము చాలా వెర్రితనమేస్తూ ఉంటుంటాది.
Among all the types of pride and vanity, pride of education has a very high place.
అప్పుడు లోక జ్ఞానము కంటే ఆత్మజ్ఞానము బ్రహ్మజ్ఞానము అత్యవసరమని ఉద్ధారకుడు తన కుమారుడైన శ్వేతకేతునికి చక్కగా బోధించాడు.
Then he taught his son that without having the general knowledge and common sense, his education is incomplete and useless.
ఒక చిన్న ఉదాహరణ,
One small example.
ఎవరైనా మనం చూచినప్పుడు కొత్త వారిని మీరెవరండి అని ప్రశ్నించడానికి పోయినప్పుడు అతను నేనెవరో నాకు తెలియదంటే మనం ఏమని భావిస్తాం? అతను ఒక పిచ్చివాడని భావిస్తాం.
You come across a stranger, let us assume. You ask him, may I know who you are? If he tells you, I do not know who I am, you consider him as a mad person.
అదే విధముగా నీవెవరో నీకు తెలియనప్పుడు ఇతరమైనటువంటి దానిని తెలుసుకున్నట్టుగా ప్రయత్నించినప్పుడు నీవు కూడా ఆ పిచ్చివాడి కంటే పెద్దవాడు కాదు కదా.
Similar is your case. If anyone asks you who you are, if you really do not know who you are and if you are trying to find out everyone else, are you not worse than that mad person?
కనుక మొట్టమొదట తనను తాను గుర్తించుకోవడానికి ప్రయత్నించాలి.
In the first instance, therefore, everyone has to understand who he is.
లేక దానికి జవాబు చెప్పచ్చు, నేను ఫలాని రామయ్యను అని చెప్పచ్చు.
One may say that I am such and such, Ramaya.
నేను రామయ్యను అన్నప్పుడు రామయ్య దేహం యొక్క పేరు, నేననేటువంటిది ఎవరు?
When one says that I am Ramaya, Ramaya is the name given to the body. Then who is that?
రామయ్యకు ప్రత్యేకంగా నేను అనేటువంటిది ఒకటి ఉంటుండాలి కదా అధికంగా.
There is one I separate from Ramaya. Who is that I?
ఆ యొక్క నేను తత్వాన్ని మాత్రం గుర్తించాలి.
It is necessary to find out that I principle.
ఆ నేను అనేటువంటిదే హృదయము,
That
ఆ
I,
నేను అనేటువంటిదే ఆత్మ, ఆ నేను అనేటువంటిదే బ్రహ్మం.
that principle of I is heart, Atma and Brahman.
ఈ హృదయం అనేటువంటిది సర్వత్రా ఉండినటువంటిది.
This heart is found everywhere.
ఒక చిన్న ఉదాహరణము,
One small example.
ఒక చిత్రకారుడు ఒక కాగితం పైన చక్కగా ఒక నర్తకిని చిత్రించాడు.
One painter painted the figure of a dancer on a piece of paper.
ఇక్కడ కాలు వంగింది, చెయ్యి వంగింది, వ్రేలు వంగింది, అనేక రకములుగా కూడా నృత్యం చేసినట్టుగా తను చిత్రించాడు.
The picture was caught in such a posture that it was representing dancing in every limb of hers. Hand,
తల త్రిప్పినట్టుగా కనిపించింది, కాలు వంచినట్టుగా కనిపించింది, చేలు వంచినట్టుగా కనిపించింది, వ్రేళ్లు వంచిన అన్ని వంపులతోన హెచ్చు తగ్గులతోన కనిపించింది ఆ చిత్రము.
In that picture, it was so clear that the head was turned, the movement of hand, the movement of legs, fingers, everything was giving the impression.
దృశ్యానికి హెచ్చు తక్కువలుగా కనిపిస్తుంటాది కానీ ఆ కాగితం మనం చివరి చూస్తే ఏ హెచ్చు తక్కువలు లేవు.
When you see the picture there are those ups and downs. But you see the surface of the paper, there is nothing, no difference on the surface
కొన్ని
of the paper.
చిత్రముల లోపల పెద్ద పెద్ద పర్వతాలంతా కూడాను గొప్పగా ఎత్తుగా తగ్గుగా పల్లంగా ఈ విధంగా కనిపిస్తుంటాయి.
In the picture, some of the mountains will be looking, there will be a lot of ups and downs, modulations, and
కానీ పిక్చర్ ను మనము ఆ యొక్క కాగితం అంటి చూస్తే అందులో ఏమాత్రం కూడా హెచ్చు పల్లము లేవు.
but you feel that paper with your hand, there is no ups, no downs, it is a clean surface.
అదే విధముగానే ఈ హృదయమునందు ఈ జగత్ అనేటువంటిది హెచ్చు పల్లములు, మంచి చెడ్డలు, పాపపుణ్యములు, సత్యాసత్యములు, కష్ట సుఖములు ఈ విధమైనటువంటి వ్యత్యాసం మనకు కనిపిస్తూ ఉండినప్పటికీ హృదయ స్థాయి యందు ఇందులో ఏమాత్రం కూడా భేదములు కనిపించవు.
Similar is the case with heart. You experience sorrow, joy, and all dualities in the heart. But when you go to the state of heart itself, actually there is no such difference at all.
ఆదికి అంత్యమునకు లేనటువంటిది మధ్యలో కనిపించినప్పటికీ అది కూడా లేనటువంటిది.
That which doesn't exist in the beginning and at the end, even when it makes its appearance in the middle, truly speaking, it doesn't exist.
ఇది ఒక టంబ్లర్ అంటాము.
Here is a tumbler.
దీనికి రూపము ఒక్కటి, నామం ఒక్కటి ఉంటుండాలి.
It has got a name and a form.
ఇది రూపము.
This is the form.
దీనికి తగిన టంబ్లర్ అనేటువంటిది నామము.
Tumbler is the name given to it.
ఈ రూపమును నామమును తీసివేస్తే ఉండేదేమిటి? ఎండి మాత్రమే ఉన్నది.
You take out this name and form. What remains is silver.
ఇది టంబ్లర్ కాక పూర్వము వెండే.
Before it became tumbler, it was silver.
టంబ్లర్ సమయమునందు ఇది వెండే.
In the form of tumbler also, it is silver.
దీని టంబ్లర్ ను చెడగొట్టి ఒక ముద్దగా చేసినప్పుడు అప్పుడు వెండి.
You reduce it into a mass, it is again silver.
ఇది ఆది అంత్యమునందు వెండిగానే ఉంటున్నది. మధ్యలో వచ్చినటువంటి ఇవే ఈ రూపనామములు.
In the beginning it was silver, and in the end it is silver. In the middle you got the name and form, tumbler.
కనుకనే దీనిని మిథ్యా జగత్తు అని కూడా పేరు వచ్చింది.
That is why this particular world is called Mithya world.
So that's that second part of that discourse. Swami starts with that lovely story of Shvetaketu.
Correct.
It is a very famous story from the Upanishads.
Mm-hmm.
And I think before that Swami says that the basis of the Brahmanda is actually in the individual itself.
Correct.
And it's easier to look within and to find the truths than to acquire all the knowledge, which is outside. Swami starts with that and then he goes to that story.
Mm-hmm.
And a wonderful story in that sense because, here is the father who has the capacity to impart that ultimate knowledge to the son.
Correct.
But he doesn't do that. He says you go and acquire all the knowledge which you think is necessary for your life, which you think is going to give you that, learning.
Correct.
And after he comes back, then he tells him, have you learned that by knowing which you know everything?
In a sense, it's very similar to what Swami says. I have brought you all here to give you the worldly education. It's like giving you the butter. But I'm holding the stick of Atma Vidya behind. Like how Mother Yashoda held the stick behind and held the butter in the front to attract little Krishna. So he says, what I really want to give you is Atma Vidya. What I wanted to give you is knowledge of the Atman. And that is why I have started this institution and university. It's amazing. And, really, as we discussed before, if you go back in 1990 and you are actually sitting in this hall and Swami is talking these concepts, really, how many people would have, contemplated? I hope enough, all of them would have, because some people, as we were discussing earlier, who were there during this series of discourse, for a month or so after the series, they all were, in a state of inspiration, I would say, in a state of spontaneous silence, if you would put it that way.
Right.
Because it was so powerful. I mean, these concepts are so powerful. And it's just like taking the essence of all the Upanishads and giving it to you.
And this very statement, have you known that by knowing which, You know, there's so many forms in which Swami would say this. Swami would say, "You've come to me, have you received that? By receiving which you have received everything." The Chinnakatha which Swami would say is about a king who opens an exhibition and says anybody can walk in and take anything.
Okay.
And there is this one young lady who comes in and she looks at everything with disinterest and she doesn't pick anything. The king observes her and comes to her and says, "You're not picking anything." So she says, "No, I don't know what to pick." And then she turns to the king and say, "Can I have you?" And the king is surprised. He says, "Why do you want me?" And she says, "I want to pick that by taking which I'll have everything."
Wow.
And you know, the king recognizes the wisdom in her voice. And Swami would say, "You've come here instead of asking every day for something. Ask for that by receiving which all your needs will be fulfilled. You will have no more needs. No more wants will be there."
That beautiful statement even Nisargadatta Maharaj says. So he says, the only way in which you can help a person is to put him in a state beyond the need for help. So, you know, any other help you do to a person, he is going to need your help again.
Right.
So the only state is to put him beyond the need for help.
Right.
Are you able to do that?
Something what even Prabhakar Rao sir shared with us when he was contemplating on that help ever, hurt never. He was going on thinking, why does Swami say help ever, help ever? Okay, and then it just struck him. He felt that it was help ever to empower.
Okay.
So he said you should help people in such a way that they can henceforth help themselves.
Correct.
You know, helping them should not make them dependent on you.
Correct. Then he goes on to this example of his calling Ramaya. Right. I am Ramaya. And very nicely Swami always says, body is a water bubble, mind is a mad monkey, I am not the body, I am not the mind, who am I? This is to be a continuous phrase which Swami would say. And here Swami is saying, I am Ramaya. But Ramaya is the name given to the body. And who am I?
Right, because I think people who have changed their names during the course of their life, they will be able to relate to it.
Right, very right.
Correct. So many people, it's very simple. You just give a government form is filled, paper notice is given, and then your name is changed.
Correct.
Okay, till then, who are you? You're Ramaya. And the next day, you're not that.
Oh, that was my previous name.
Right. And that's the thing which Swami would often say, when somebody would ask, Swami would ask, who are you? And if he says, I'm a doctor, Swami would say, no, that is your profession. Who are you?
Correct.
I'm so-and-so's husband, I'm so-and-so's father, I'm so-and-so's wife. He says, no, that is your relationship. That is, who are you really? It's, I'm reminded of a funny incident which happened. We would have this Gram Seva every year, right? And for the sake of communication and smooth functioning of the thing, we have these mobile operators.
Correct.
Every truck is given a mobile operator and he's supposed to communicate where he is, what is his stock situation, or if he's lost.
To the home base.
Right, to the home base which is here in Puttaparthi.
Correct.
There would always be these conversations and a lot of fun used to happen because of the, the misunderstandings which happened. Swami would say, I was talking to one of the boys, who used to assist Swami in the interview room. Swami told him that, the mobile phones have complicated communication. Swami said, because now people don't know how to communicate because of communication devices. That's a typical example of that. And I remember once one of the trucks, we didn't know where it was. They were wondering where this particular truck is. So they called up this boy and he said, they asked him, where are you situated? So this boy was actually clueless. He didn't know the name of the village. He said, I don't know exactly, but I'm situated next to a huge cinema theater. Okay. So they realized that this is the town which he was talking to because not all villages here have a cinema theater. So then they asked, there are 2 cinema halls in that particular town. So which theater are you next to? And this boy looked around and he said, I'm to the cinema hall which is to my right. The idea of wrong references, when Swami when Swami is asking, who are you? You are giving a reference of somebody who probably doesn't know who he is.
Correct.
You are referring to yourself as so-and-so's son, so-and-so's daughter. And who is he? And he will be so-and-so something. So all floating references, and Swami is saying, fix that reference, find that thing which will not change. Because if you look at, something which is very commonly asked is, your dream state. Let me say I have given you some money in my dream. I cannot come and ask you for that money in the waking state.
Mm.
And we have kind of accepted that the dream state is unreal because it lasts for a short span of time.
Correct.
And here is Swami saying that even this life which you are doing in your waking state is actually a very, very small time in the continuum of time.
Correct.
So that is why this is also a floating reference. Don't use this.
Passing clouds, passing clouds. To explain the same concept, even Nisargadatta Maharaj beautifully says, he says, it's like on a cloth, very beautiful scenes are painted. It's like painted cloth.
Okay.
On the cloth, here Swami is talking about
The paper, right.
Paper and a painter painting a picture. So I just got this
Right.
analogy that he gives. He says, you give the cloth to a washerman and he washes the cloth. First what happens, the top layer of paint goes. Then you further wash it, then even the shades and all that goes. And what remains is the cloth. But the cloth was always there. Even when you thought that this was a beautiful painting, the cloth was always there. Only thing was it was hidden from the view because of the painting.
Right. In the earlier discourse, Swami says that, when Swami says when you throw your clothes to a dhobi, a washerman, when it comes back, you say the washerman has made my clothes white. And Swami says washerman did not make it white, it was always white. The washerman just removes what was not part of it.
That's true. And so he says here, he redefines Hridayam, not a heart.
Right.
He says Hridayam is Atma. Hridayam is the self. And Hridayam is one that is present. It is Brahman. It is the one that is all pervasive and omnipresent. When you think of the 5 elements, for example, are they representations or are they physical manifestations of this supreme consciousness? When you say I am omnipresent, when Swami says Hridayam is omnipresent, what is there here? It is air that is there, or it is ether that is there. So that is also a part of him. That is also part of Hridayam. It's almost like a whole world full of transparent bodies with no meaning to it. The body is easily broken down into 5 elements. The 5 elements are, body into organs into cells, and cells into 5 elements finally. So he says Hridayam is omnipresent. So that is the true definition of Hridayam. And Swami made a statement here saying, true freedom springs forth only at that level. So we have to still, I think, explore this discourse to understand how exactly that.
Right, even that analogy which Swami gives, those 2 analogies which Swami gives of the tumbler and then of that of a painting.
Yes.
Where you don't feel the depth. You see the depth, but you don't feel it on the paper.
Correct.
A lovely analogy. But then Swami says it's similarly in the heart also. All the differences you see is outside. If you actually go within your heart, there is no difference. There is no pain, there is no untruth, there is no truth. It's a very, very strong point which Swami is making. But that again, makes us think, what is that Hridayam which Swami is referring to?
See, it's like this. It's like, I think the Swami has spoken of it in both the ways. One is, he says, if you want to qualify as my devotee, you want to be my devotee, you have to be beyond pain and pleasure. You have to be beyond joy and sorrow. And he says, if you know the truth, you will automatically realize that these are not you.
Right.
So it actually amounts to the same thing, but the approach is in 2 different ways. By understanding the ultimate truth, you can contemplate on that and therefore be unaffected by joy and sorrow, or by gradually, cultivating that approach to going beyond joy and sorrow, you understand what your actual reality is.
That's the beauty, the way Swami achieves it. I remember when we interviewed one of the old students, he says there was a period of time when he was a student here and he fell sick. I think he got some jaundice or malaria or something like that. And he couldn't come for darshan for a few days. He had lost a lot of weight. He was very weak. So finally, when he was a little better, he came to Mandir. But he was looking very sorry. So he thought he'll come and tell Swami and Swami might give him some prasadam. So very pathetically, he went to Swami and he said, Swami, I'm not feeling well. I've not been keeping well. I've not had darshan for so many days. Swami said, oh, not feeling well. Chala santosham, Swami said. Okay, and see the way Swami plays, it needs somebody with that kind of selfless love to achieve some things with such simple words. This boy goes back to the hostel, and he's ruminating all these words. Okay, and he says, he shared with us in that interview, he says, when I went back, I was in pain because I was feeling very sick. I was feeling drained out and been through that for a week. But then after this incident, the thinking process which I had was, here I am in pain, and my Swami is telling that he is very happy. Okay, and he said, if Swami is so happy, why should I be bothered about this pain?
Beautiful.
Okay, he said that moment, that self-sympathy and that feeling of that pain pulling him down just vanished. He said, if Swami is happy about what I'm going through, why should I be worried about it? One thing is to reach that truth and say that this pain will not touch me. But here is something, just that love for Swami and knowing that here is my Swami, nobody is bothered about my welfare more than this Swami. And if the Swami is not bothered about my pain, then this pain is definitely not worth bothering about.
And, in our casual conversation, you mentioned another thing, which is when somebody is really in pain, if the mind is removed from the object of pain, and the mind is diverted for those few minutes, for those few seconds,
right.
If the mind is totally distracted, you forget that you are in pain. That's true, when you are having pain and you are sitting and somebody knocks the door and then your whole attention is on who is coming in. For those few milliseconds, you forget pain. So basically, pain to the body exists. The more you identify, your mind identifies with that pain and you think that it is your body, then you feel upset about it.
Right. In fact, that is what Swami used to say when Swami would encourage people to do seva. Because Swami would say that when you see others in pain, then the importance you give to your pain will actually reduce.
Okay.
Because you will realize that the pain you're feeling is because you're giving importance to something which is trivial or something which is happening. It may not be trivial, but because you're giving importance to it. And when you see the larger picture, when you see more people in pain, and that's why one of the philosophers says that if you want to succeed in worldly life, you have to look at those who are better than you and try to strive to reach there. That's for success in business and worldly life.
Okay.
But if you want success in spiritual life, you have to look at those who are below you and be grateful for what you are.
That's right.
That tripti or that satisfaction and that gratitude, that is so important.
Amazing. And we are in this state now where everything is being redefined. And right from freedom to Hridayam. And he very clearly says the heart is not the organ that we call the heart. Hridayam is all pervasive and Hridayam is the Atman.
I'm reminded of what Swami said. Dr. Jivanandam, one of the very famous doctors in the US who comes and works here in the super specialty. His specialty was heart transplant. He was very good at that. And very jocularly Swami once looked at him and said, you do heart transplant, I do heart transformation.
Wow.
And he said, I am better than you.
That's right. So this whole thing of how and what true freedom means and how true freedom can be experienced only at the level of the Hridayam is what we are going to learn about in the next portion of this discourse. That'll
have to wait till next week. So dear listeners, we take leave of you. On behalf of Sai Prakash, on behalf of myself, we offer this humble effort of us at Swami's Lotus Feet. Do you have any thoughts to share with us? If you have any feedback, you can always write to listener@radiosai.org. We hope we are making sense in what we are saying, but we definitely consider this as our humble effort and as our loving offering to our dear Swami.
Sai Ram, you just heard an episode of our radio series, Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam, that is, listen, reflect and absorb. This is a segment hosted live on Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. by Radio Sai's Sai Prakash and Prem, only on Asia's stream of Radio Sai Global Harmony. Today's episode was first broadcast live on 27th March 2014. The discourses undertaken for study in this program are from the series of discourses delivered as part of the summer course in Indian Culture and Spirituality 1990. The clips played in this episode were from the discourse delivered on 31st May 1990. To listen to the next part of this program, tune in same time, same day next week. Please do write to us and let us know what you think about this program by writing to listener@radiosai.org. Thank you and a loving Sai Ram from Prashant Nilayam.